Hey, folks, welcome back to the show. Today's episode is going to be a little bit of a change of pace. But before we get into that, I just wanted to plug a couple of the programs and things I've got going on. Number one, I want to extend an invitation to every one of you to consider joining me on Mighty Networks, which is my private membership community. You can find out more about it on my website at natnidham.com. There's a tab at the top that says BSP community, but some of the things that we do in there, it's a small, intimate community. It is paid. So you always have the option, of course, to go to the free community on Facebook, which is the Optimizing Superhuman Performance Group. But in the Mighty Networks community, I do live Q&As almost every week. And the weeks that I don't do live Q&As, I have an expert doing live Q&As instead of me. So for example, a couple of months ago, we had Dayan Goodenow, the plasmalogen genius, come in, and not only did he do a live Q&A, but he offered the community the opportunity to do a 30-day brain reset with plasmalogens, including a before and after test. And last week, we just went through everybody's results with Dr. Goodenow, and everybody learned amazing things about their health and their brain. So we do these N of 1 experiments. We do, like I said, the live Q&As. It's uncensored, so we don't have anybody watching what we're talking about. It's pretty neat. And also, if you join as an annual member, you get access to the first version of my peptide crash course, and you will also get access to the second version of my peptide crash course, which I promise you is coming. I know it's taking forever to come out, but it is coming, and you get that included with your annual membership. So that's the plug for the Mighty Networks group. The other thing I wanted to let you know about is, for those of you who've missed it, I've got another Women's Longevity and Resilience Retreat, our third one, coming up this November 1st to 6th in beautiful Cabarete on the northeast coast of the Dominican Republic. It is for only 10 women only, and it's 5 days of beautiful movement, outdoors, chef cooked meals. We do learning around nutrition, supplementation. We talk about bioregulators and peptides. We talk about biological age. We talk about all the things. And in addition to that, you get body work done. There's ice bathing, there's yoga, there's sunrise walks on the beach. It's a magical, magical, magical few days. And if this even begins to resonate for you, head on over to natnidham.com. There is a retreat page there, and there's a link to book a short call with me and my co-host, Dasha Maximov, where we can answer all your questions. Okay, so thank you so much, you guys, for being here. If you enjoy this episode and you get value from it, please make sure to share it with your friends and networks. And if you do enjoy the episode, then please make sure to leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening to it on, because this is what allows us to climb up the ranks. And I'll have you know that thanks to you guys, we're up consistently in the top 100, very often the top 50 podcasts in the US in the nutrition category. So let's talk about this episode. You may, and if you're listening to me, you've heard about how important organ meats are when it comes to health. But many people still shy away from the idea of consuming them in place of a steak. And in some cases, it's because of taste or the icks or whatever it is. So today, I'm joined by James Barry, the founder of Pluck Seasonings, and we're going to talk about the many benefits of eating organ meats. We discuss why, as a society, we've moved away from them and the perception that certain foods are healthier than others. James also explains why he decided to start making Pluck Seasonings and how these organ meat seasonings compare to eating the real thing. And I will tell you from personal experience, they are delicious. You wouldn't even know that you're eating organ meats. You just know that you're sprinkling really good tasting herbs and spices on your food. So James Barry was able to achieve this due to his 17 plus years in the culinary field. He started as a private chef cooking for celebrities, people like Tom Cruise, Mariska Hargitay, George Clooney, Gerard Butler, Barbara Streisand, and John Cusack. More recently, James launched his first functional food product, Pluck, an organ-based seasoning. It's the first of its kind, and it's an amazingly easy and delicious way for people to get organ meats into their diet. I mean, kids love this stuff. They don't care. It just tastes good. James is also a published cookbook author, having co-authored the recipes in Margaret Floyd's book, Eat Naked, and co-authored the follow-up cookbook, The Naked Foods Cookbook. He most recently co-authored the recipes in Dr. Alejandro Younger's book, Clean 7. So we want to thank you to our sponsors for making this episode possible. And of course, one of our sponsors would be Eat Pluck. If you want to get your hands on some of these delicious spice mixes, just use code BSP10 to save 10% on your order at eatpluck.com. Another one of our sponsors, Profound Health. You're going to learn more about their products later on this podcast. To get your hands on some incredible bioregulator peptides, which by the way, where do you think bioregulators come from? They come from organs. So just go to profound-health.com and use promo code longevity15 to save 15% on your first order. And now, without any further delay, let's just jump into the episode. Enjoy. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that all of the information presented in this podcast is for information purposes only. No medical advice, no diagnosing, no treatments suggested here. Before you try anything that you hear about or learn about here, make sure that you check with your medical provider. Welcome to the show, James. It is such a pleasure to finally get to have this talk with you.
Very exciting. Thank you for having me, Natalie.
Of course, as always, we had a nice little chat before the podcast, and we first met at the Upgrade Labs conference in LA. Was it LA? Yeah. Beverly Hills, actually, in September. And I remember walking by your booth a couple of times, and I'm like, spices, what the hell are spices doing at the show? And then all of a sudden I see the word organs. And I'm like, and I've got we can talk about this later. I've got a bit of a soft spot for organ meats, and just literally slam on the brakes and go, wait, what? What are you doing here?
I know. I was really impressed. We got a lot of feedback on social media that we were one of people's favorite finds at a biohacking conference, a food product. So I was really honored that was the case.
Well, I think part of that is because the message is definitely getting out, certainly in the biohacking or health optimization community, about how important organ meats are. And yet, as a culture, we don't like making them, we don't like touching them, and we don't like to eat them. And so, it's part of that disconnect, really, that I think that's happened over time between people and their roots. Because as we were just talking about, if you look at any traditional cookbook, or you can find someone's grandmother, somewhere in the family lore, somewhere in that culture, somebody was making liver or heart. Or, I mean, in my family, it's liver, heart, kidneys, brain. Like, all of these foods were foods that were prepared as part of a regular diet. And yet we've lost that.
We've absolutely lost it. And it's funny too, because, when we talk about ancestral eating, a lot of times we're thinking Paleolithic, right? We're thinking way back in the day, but when you're talking about organ meats, you're talking like just last generation, our parents or our grandparents. It's like, it's not that long ago, everyone was eating it. So the question then becomes, well, what happened? And from my research, I've found a few answers. One being that, for some of us, our parents were forced to eat them. So then when they had kids, they didn't want to force them to eat them. So you had that kind of psychology going on. But the most consistent language that I continue to read about regarding organ meats and their history is really around economics. That basically, at one point, organ meats, and potentially even, well, I think that's changing now, but potentially up to this point, they're seen as poor people's food. They're seen as like food that is not as much value money wise than, let's say, a different cut, a muscle meat cut, a ribeye or anything like that. And so, particularly after World War II, you had people that now were making more money, because when the men went away, the women started working. When they came back, the women didn't stop working. So now you had households that had double the income to a degree. I mean, I know women were not paid as what they should have been paid, but either way, they had more money. And so they saw it as like, well, we can afford these higher price cuts. Let's eat them. And so it's really been a game of economics for organ meats. So then as less people bought them, they were not as available. And now we're at a place, because when we go to a butcher shop, we don't see them. So now we've lost the acclimation of just visually seeing them. We've lost the acclimation of cooking them and just the familiarity of cooking them regularly. And then for some people, they don't even know where to source them anymore. So of course we've fallen out of the familiar zone. So now we're in the unfamiliar. So that's very much part of my mission is I'm really trying to get us back on track, our health back on track by focusing on nose to tail. I really wholeheartedly believe that one of our issues, of many, we have lots of issues in the world, but one of them is that we are not eating nose to tail. We're only focusing on muscle meat, and we're missing out on these nutrients. Over 93% of America, and I have to think that it's a similar number around the world, are nutrient deficient.
Yeah.
But I can speak in the US, we're not calorie deficient. So it has nothing to do with that we're not getting enough food. It has to do with the food we're eating. So we're making poor choices, particularly here in the US. And so I believe if we start getting those nutrients from organ meats, if we start feeling better in our body, then we start treating others better, because we really do. We're such creatures of habit that we treat people how we feel. That's really you can boil so many things down to the simplicity. That doesn't mean it's easy. I'm more just saying you can boil it down to very simple concepts. And I really do believe we're so focused, we're so egotistical that we treat people how we feel. That's basically what I found. So if I can get you feeling better in your body, I believe that you'll treat other people better. And now we have the starts of a better world.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of really great points there. And I think that, going back to the organ meats and how important they are to human health and how we lost track of them, it's so interesting. My husband tells stories about how when he was in university, they were on a very tight budget, him and his friends, and they would go buy liver and make, now they did call the dish scuzzerole, unfortunately. And I don't think it was any kind of a culinary feat, because I think anything that was in that fridge that wasn't running away on its own was thrown into the pot with the liver. But it was one way for them to make ends meet, was to eat liver. And, unbeknownst to them, they were actually doing themselves a favor.
Yeah.
But, it's also just become really hard to source organ meats, right? As fewer people buy them. Certainly, if you go to a grocery store, you're like I'm privileged enough to be able to buy my meat from a farmer and, generally not buy from your corner grocery store, because unfortunately that part of our food system has become so depleted and damaged over the years. But you cannot walk into a store in most places and access, you might find liver, maybe, but beyond that, you might find marrow bones if you're lucky. But beyond that, I think it's very hard to find organs. It's even hard to get a chicken that still has the organs in it.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's funny. It's both harder and easier. So it's harder in your everyday. If you're used to just going to your local grocery store, yes, it's harder. But if you're someone who's used to buying your food online, it's actually easier, because now we have such a bigger reach. There's so many online purveyors that are selling organ meats. You just have to find them. US Wellness Meats is one of them. We have a bunch of farms here. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and there's a bunch of farms here that I can access at farmers markets or online. But you're right. Your regular kind of Whole Foods or your regular market that you're going to is not going to always have organs. And if it does, it might have very specific animals like chicken livers, maybe, and they might be in the freezer. It's a crapshoot. You never know what they're going to have. Now, what is interesting though is that most ethnic markets sell the organs. So, like here in the U.S., Mexican markets, they sell almost everything. You can find the tongue, you can find the stomach lining, which is called tripe. And what's fascinating about that is, I was just talking to someone the other day, which we're going to be sharing. We're doing a program right now for the month of January where we're promoting organ meats. So we're calling it Organuary, where you take over the month of January, and we're challenging people to eat organs once a week. And so I interviewed this person who really does walk her talk. They make organs once a week. She's been doing it for 10 years. And she was telling me about tripe and how basically when you go to buy it in a grocery store, it's bright white. And the reason is it's because they bleach it to clean it. They literally soak it in bleach. And so when she would first buy it, she would have to go to a Mexican market and she would have to really work it to help get some of that bleach smell out, and really clean it kind of as purely as she could to get out those chemicals. But when she started to buy it from her local farmer, which didn't always happen, but when she did, the lesson of why they bleach it was very evident. So basically, she said that it was covered in grass. It was kind of greenish. And then once you cleaned the green, it was then brown, but she had to clean it so much because everything that cow ate was in there. So like there would sometimes be sand. She said if the cow ate nails, she would find nails in it, things like that. So you start to kind of appreciate, well, you both are, it's kind of like a love-hate thing, right? Because sometimes the way that conventional industry does something, it's like, oh, they're using chemicals that you wouldn't want in your body. But then at the same time, you sometimes learn why. You're like, oh yeah, there's probably a reason of why they did this. And then maybe they are taking the shortcut now, but originally the original reason they had to clean it this way is because of how dirty it was.
Yeah. Well, my grandmother used to make tripe, and I have to say, I'm not a fan.
Interesting. Because of the labor or the taste?
Well, I wasn't a fan of I didn't like the texture. I didn't love the taste. But I know that when she made tripe, it was a job and a half, because she wasn't buying bleached tripe,
Right.
So, and not because she didn't want to, but because it wasn't available to her. And, she would go to the butcher shop, and whatever butcher shop in Montreal. I actually remember as a little kid going with her, and, I'm old enough that when I was really small, they were still killing the chickens when you bought the chickens in certain places.
My mom tells me about that as well. And Coney Island, that's what they were doing too.
Yeah. And, but when she would buy tripe, like it was a real job and a half to prepare it. And so, in today's world, it may not be practical to do that, but at the same time, we are starting to see some interesting products hit the market, because actually, there's a couple of things I want to talk about before I get there. Like, one of the things I wanted to ask you is your point of view on liver, because liver is one of those organs. Number one, from a texture, from a taste, people love it, they hate it, one or the other. But I think there's a lot of myths around liver. And I even know medical doctors who say, oh my God, I would never eat liver. All the toxins of the body sit in the liver. And I think that's one of the big myths about liver. And I don't know if you've kind of delved into this yourself and you have a point of view here, because I know why I eat liver, but I'm interested to hear from you.
Yeah, I definitely dived into it. So, and it's funny, perspective really is wide open. Everyone shares, it seems, a different perspective. So I'll share what I've heard, and then I'll share what my opinion. So I have heard that from some people that vitamin A toxicity, which is what some people are talking about when they talk about liver, is a real thing, that you have to be concerned about. Then I've heard from another camp that says, well, actually, when the vitamin A is coming from a whole food and not a synthetic source, that your body will regulate it, that you can't get vitamin A toxicity. So I've heard both sides. But when I think about an animal, the whole animal, let's just say we're a tribe and we just killed, we'll just say a cow, even though back in the day it was probably a different animal, but let's just say we killed a cow. There's only one liver in that cow. So as a tribe of, let's just say 15, 25 people, we are sharing that one liver. And in most cases, we're giving it to the people that need it the most, the sick, the pregnant, the trying to get pregnant, the kids, we're sharing it with most of them. So we're only getting, a little bit. I mean, maybe an ounce or two, we're not getting, 4 ounces a day, so I think therein lies the middle ground somewhere, that whether vitamin A toxicity is real or not, I do think that to get it, you have to eat a lot.
Yeah, you do. I mean, to get vitamin A toxicity from liver, you got to eat. I think the people who got vitamin A toxicity from liver were Arctic explorers who ate the livers of their dogs, and a lot of it, and with nothing else to balance it out. Right. It's a little bit like protein poisoning, right? Totally. A friend of mine's husband, they just had to call 911 on New Year's Eve because he passed out and got really sick. And their friend was like, oh, it's because we had too much protein tonight. He got protein poisoning. And I'm like, he went into protein shock. I'm like, yeah, no, actually, that's not a thing. I mean, you could get protein poisoning if you only ate protein, no fat, no carbs, no nothing, and for a really long time. That whole what's it called? Rabbit syndrome or something.
Right.
But people, they kind of fabricate these, they take a little nugget of something and extrapolate it into a much bigger thing. So, as it turns out, it's probably the fact that they had oysters and burrata and tenderloin with the cream sauce. Oh, and the white clam chowder and about a bottle of wine each. And it just goes on from there. And so I'm sure his body, when it did go into shock, it was not protein shock. It was probably, oh my God, how many calories can I possibly consume here in one sitting?
Right. And or the mixture of those things, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it's impossible to really assess the toxic soup that we all embody, that we're processing every day, all these different pieces of whether it's food or toxins in our environment, but and no one really knows, well, what happens when you mix them all together? No one's actually studied that. They only isolate things. So
and in massive quantities. But going back to the liver, I think one of the things people worry about is because the liver, we talk about how the liver works to detoxify toxins, and people worry, they somehow feel like they all just sit in the liver. So now you're eating all these toxins and the liver doesn't store.
No. In an unhealthy person or animal, right. Yes, but that's really has to do with excretion and are the elimination pathways opening and
correct
working properly. But a lot of people think, to your point, and I love how you did that visual, a lot of people think that the organs are like a sponge. And they're not absorbing things and holding them. They're really more of a filter. And what they're ultimately doing is they're converting, they're processing and converting potentially toxic byproducts into more water soluble forms so that it can then be excreted. So it's a filter that's capturing, it's processing, it's converting to then get it into your elimination pathways, whether it's your urine, your poop, your sweat. And so that's why, if you're someone that has a toxic overload, that you're not pooping daily, you don't sweat very much, or your pee is the wrong color or anything like that. Then you're someone that I would just be, in general, focus on your elimination pathways first, then focus on, are you absorbing these foods? Because I used to tell people all the time I say, look, I could have the best food in the world, but if you're not absorbing it and eliminating the things you need to eliminate, then there's no point. You can't only focus on one part of the journey.
No, absolutely. I love that. And, going back to the organs again, I think, we were talking about this earlier. It's this whole idea of, what is it about organs that makes them so nutrient dense, right? So we know that for liver, for example, you get a lot of people in the carnivore community will refer to liver as nature's multivitamin because it holds so many vitamins and minerals, and to your point, in proper ratio, in balance, and in ways that prevents the over dominance, if you will, of one thing over another. I mean, obviously someone with hemochromatosis probably, like a disease that forces them where their body doesn't process and let go of iron, for example. And that's a genetic condition. It doesn't happen that often. That person probably shouldn't eat a whole lot of liver, if any, but with the exception of those people, it's a way of accessing very, very nutrient dense food in its whole form, which you were talking about earlier. But I think the other interesting thing about organs, which is something that I talk a lot about in the communities I speak to, or whenever I'm at a conference speaking, is there's these peptides, these little protein chains that occur in organs called bioregulator peptides. And they actually have the power to help to regenerate that same organ when we consume those peptides. So, it's kind of digging under the surface of that whole traditional approach to somebody has a heart condition, we feed them heart. So heart has a lot of CoQ10 in it as a meat. But what else is in that heart that's going to help the person who's
Absolutely.
eating it?
Oh yeah. I love that. I have this tenets of organ meat, and like supports like, that organs provide organ specific nutrients, is one of them. And I'm a big believer in that. And I was actually the person I was referring to earlier who made the tripe and everything. She was going from a SAD diet, a standard American diet, and 10 years ago, to then starting to incorporate organs. And she was sharing that, prior to eating organs and eating that standard American diet, she was having lots of like ailments. She would bump herself on a chair and get big bruises. She would hurt herself regularly. She had brain fog. She had all these different lack of energy, didn't sleep very well, had all these chronic illnesses that a lot of us have but think are normal because we've been with them so long, right?
Yeah.
And that's really, really key, is that we have to understand that if you are not thriving, if you're not waking up every day feeling energized, then something's off. That's not a norm. Your norm should not be like slow up, getting up slowly and barely, aching and not eliminating and not feeling good throughout the day. You really, our human body, I really believe we have to come from this place of just knowing our human body is fantastic. It's truly stupendous. It is amazing. So we have to come from that place of like, if our body's amazing, we should be feeling amazing. If we're not feeling amazing, then we're not serving our natural body's abilities. So that's why I look at organ meats. I'm like, okay, Mother Nature's vitamin, undeniable. You can compare organ meats to any other food on the planet, and it will tick off everything.
Yeah.
And it won't just be like a little bit higher, in iron or magnesium or whatever you're measuring. It will be like 7 times, 12 times. It's unparalleled. And yet we're not utilizing. So we talk a lot about food waste. We talk a lot about, carbon neutral. We talk a lot about, I want my dollar to go stretch as far as it will go. But yet if you're not eating organ meats, you're not walking that talk, because you have the same quality, 100% grass-fed cow. Okay. And if you're only eating the ribeye from that cow, which is, $24 a pound, if not sometimes more.
Yeah.
If you're only eating that, then you're missing out on these other cuts of that same animal, same quality fed animal, that are a lot of times cheaper and even more nutritious. Like, and you're completely missing out on that. And so to me, that means you're spending your money unwisely. You're not being efficient. You're not being economical, because a lot of times those organs, talk about, you want to support your small farmer. A lot of times the farmer doesn't even get the organs because they don't see any value in it. If there's no one buying the organs, then they lose money on that. So the only, and then there's lots of other things as well. Like a lot of farmers, the meat processors don't even have it built into their HACCP plan that they can give the organs. So like, for example, in the US, you cannot find brain unless you're going to a farmer and you have a one-on-one relationship with them and they're giving it to you under the table. But you cannot go to a store and buy brain. It's literally illegal.
Yeah. And is that because of, what is it, Jacob Creutzfeldt or disease, the prion disease? That whole mad cow.
Yeah. It stems from that. But I've been hearing mixed things. I mean, not to feed into conspiracies, but I've been hearing that certain organs are off the market from the USDA because they have relationships with the pharmaceutical companies, and the pharmaceutical companies get those because they're, a lot of supplements of pharmaceutical companies are isolating pieces from organs, and they're putting them in their products. That is, if you get anything from Standard Process, for example, a lot of their products are from organ meats.
Sure. Well, the desiccated organs. It takes us back to the bioregulators, right? It's a desiccated thyroid supplement is going to have thyroid bioregulator in it. Right.
Exactly.
And it can actually, in someone who, is at the beginning of a thyroid that's kind of starting to shut down, if you've addressed whether it's the autoimmune issues or the diet or the inflammation that's driving that degeneration, and you can shut that down. And now you start to feed the thyroid, that whole desiccated thyroid, or maybe the thyroid bioregulator. We sometimes see people who start to see a reduction in the use of the medications. And on occasion, if they weren't too far gone to begin with, they may not need medication at some point.
Right. Which is just feeding the like supports like, right? You're eating,
Yeah.
you're eating the thyroid, and your thyroid is improving because of it. Yeah, I so believe that we are missing these things, like brain, for example. I mean, is it, of course it's probably impossible for me to connect the dots here, but I can't help but think about this, that, well, look at how high, Alzheimer's is now. Look at how the degeneration of the brain, and yet we're also not eating brain as much anymore.
Well, we're not eating brain at all anymore,
right?
Actually.
I mean, so it just makes me wonder, like, are we suffering because of this, because of these regulations, or these choices, these modern choices? And that's ultimately what I'm trying to do, because you can find brain from, like, New Zealand, for example. You can get it as a supplement. And so what I'm trying to do is really take these modern techniques of freeze drying the organs, and actually support people in reapplying them to food. So really, what the product that you originally we found each other with is Pluck. And so that's the organ-based seasoning that I created. And I took freeze-dried powdered organs, the same organs you're finding in the supplements, in the capsules. I took liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas, and I added them to organic spices and herbs, and I turned it into something that you can literally sprinkle on anything.
Yeah.
So I'm solving multiple hurdles here. So we discussed a couple of them already. We discussed knowing how to cook them. Now you don't need to know how to cook them. Just sprinkle it on your food. It could be to-go food. It could be food you made at home. It doesn't matter. Just sprinkle it on like salt and pepper. Now you don't need to know how to cook organs, because you're getting the nutrients. We also talked about sourcing. How do I find organ? Well, I already sourced it for you. I'm getting it from 100% grass-fed cows from New Zealand. Same sourcing as the big supplement companies, and I'm making sure that you're getting them. I'm getting you 5 organs, not just liver. I'm getting you as many as I can in this first run. I hope to eventually have other products that utilize the brain, the other parts of the animal that I'm not already using.
Like the thymus would be great. Kidney would be great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we have kidney right now.
Oh, you have kidney. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. But absolutely. I want to do testicles. I want to do ovaries. I want to get other parts of the animal that we're not getting. But so, and then the last one that I believe I solved is that a lot of people have this idea that organs are going to taste icky. And I find that so fascinating, because if I basically presented to you, like, so the people that are saying that they find organs icky, I always ask, well, have you actually tried them? And it's surprising that more times than not, people say, oh no, I never tried them. I'm like, but yet you think they're icky and you've never eaten them. If I put a dessert in front of you that you've never tried, would you say, oh no, I don't want to try that? You would probably go, oh no, that looks interesting, let me try it. So it's an absolute psychology going on here. It has nothing to do with the literal taste. It's feeding the psychology and the unfamiliarity. So I'm just trying to bust through that and say, look, let's make health as easy and delicious as possible, because as humans, I know this about us, that if it's easy and it's delicious, you'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's really all I want. I want to help you get organs and nose to tail eating into your diet. I know that the way you're going to do it is if it's delicious and if it's easy. And so that's really my mission, is I'm just trying to create products that utilize these nutrient dense foods, but in a just an easy application, and of course a delicious one.
Yeah. And that you don't really have to think about, right? I mean, another interesting product that's at the butchers, at some of these, more holistic butchers, I almost want to call them, right? Because they're good, they're good for us, they're good for the planet, they're good for the animals. Like, they kind of cover the whole gamut of what they're better for. But one of the products that's really gotten popular over the last number of years is the ground beef that they'll mix with ground organs. But even then, you're going to have a meat that has that has an earthier taste to it. But what I find is what's great about your products, the spice mixes, is that now you can supplement, you can even add more organs to your organs.
Yes.
But in a way that helps them to taste good.
Yeah.
With the spice blends. And I just love that you can put that spice blend on a ribeye steak or on like whatever cut of meat you like, and start to get into that whole direction of eating whole animal instead of just a muscle.
Yeah, I love, well, it's a very versatile, and I feel very fortunate that it is, because of course when I designed it, I didn't try every food in the world on it, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But over the years now, between customers and my own just longevity with it, we're discovering that it works kind of with everything. We joke that it doesn't work with ice cream. That's the only thing. But then someone
Yes.
said, well, actually, I tried it on ice cream and it tastes really good. It just, you know, it's really like whatever your flavor profile is. It works if you like savory, then it works.
Yeah.
And so I've been really kind of blessed with learning that. But we actually did put out, so we have 4 products right now. 3 of them have flavors. Meaning that they have spices and herbs to flavor them. But then one of them that we put out is called Pluck Pure, and that is 100% organ meat. So there's no salt, there's no spices, and there's no herbs. And we came out with that one because I recognize that there are people out there that really just want the 100% nutrition, that they don't care as much about the taste. They're already taking capsules and they're opening them up on their food, things like that. So I thought, well, let's make this for them, and let's make it so that it's a little bit more versatile, so that it doesn't, like, basically you add it to something that already has flavor, like a smoothie in the morning. You know, ground beef, you can mix it into the ground beef, just like the grinds that you're talking about. This is just another way to do it. Now you're getting 5 organs instead of just maybe the 1 to 3 that those companies are using.
For sure.
So it's just a lot more versatile. You can add it to a curry. You can add it to sauce. I just tell people, you add it to something that already has flavor, versus the other 3 you can provide flavor with.
Yeah, they do the work. They do the cooking work, because, you know, as we were talking about earlier, and, you know, we're kind of going backwards in this episode, because I a little bit want to talk about, you know, how you got here. Like, you didn't start out as I want to grow up and feed people organs kind of guy. Like,
No.
you started as a chef, right? And a celebrity chef at that. So at what point in your chef's journey did you figure out that this is a direction you wanted to go in? Like, what was it? What was that? Did you have an aha moment, or was it just like a slow process? Like, how did you go from feeding the likes of, I don't know who your celebrity list were, but, you know, the likes of those guys, to making little packets of spice for the rest of us?
Yeah, no, it definitely has been a journey. It's one, of course, when you look back, you can connect all the dots, but it was a gradual journey. There was no kind of like light switch necessarily, light switch moment. I have always been interested in looking at kind of adding, like looking at food and psychology. I've always been fascinated by that. I found that a dominant theme in my career has been like, well, what really works? Because we can talk till we're blue in the face about trends or about what in theory should work. But what are people actually doing on a regular basis and sustaining?
Yeah.
That to me is what works. Because I'm always telling people like, yeah, if like I was using the easy and delicious example earlier. Like, so you might have, well, actually at the biohacking conference, people kept coming up to me saying, oh, you know, I've had those liver, what are they called? The liver crisp or something.
Oh, the liver chips.
Yeah, I've had those. So they would come up to me and they said, I really like the idea of it, but I just didn't like the taste. And so I stopped buying. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Because if it's easy, which that is, liver crisps are easy, but if it's not delicious, it's just a trend. It's just something you just try. It's not something you're going to sustain. And that's, I'm only interested in what's sustainable. That's really it as a chef. I'm only interested in that. And so my sustainability look at things, or that lens has gravitated towards comfort foods. Because if you look at the history of humans, where do we go food wise? We go to comfort foods.
Yeah.
I mean, COVID, geez, like look at what happened when emotions ran high. Where did everyone go? I mean, alcohol sales increased,
Oh,
drug use, baking increased, sugar
sourdough,
intake.
sourdough bread.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we gravitated towards all those comfort foods. And so it's like, okay, so that tells me that really health is achieved when I can hit the easy spot, make it easy, when I can make it delicious, but I can also make sure that it truly is giving back to you, that it's something that really is naturally nutrient dense. And that's really where how I suddenly came to organ meats, because I didn't grow up eating organ meats. I was very picky eater, I mean, I didn't even eat a salad growing up. I hated, like, I would have a carrot, but I wouldn't eat a salad. I didn't have anything with dressing. I was very, very picky.
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't,
You really
I
were
didn't,
picky.
oh, I
Okay.
didn't have, I mean, I grew up in California, which if anyone doesn't know, California has got amazing Mexican food. It's
Hmm.
amazing place to get Mexican food. And so we would go to Mexican restaurants growing up, and I would have a hamburger. And I was that picky. I wouldn't eat most foods unless they were very specific. And so I really didn't expand my palate until I was in culinary school. So I was in my 30s, and I was entering culinary school, and I said, okay, I'm making a deal with myself. Everything I'm presented, I'm going to eat,
Good for you.
even if it's hard. And I did. And since then, I'm way more adventurous. And it was that process of going to culinary school in my 30s that really started to align that sensibility of like, hey, how I know I'm interested in making comfort foods healthy, but how do we do that? Like
Hmm.
how do I really make them healthy? Because there's so much snake oil in the world. There's so many products out there that people are saying like, oh, well, this is really, like, I always use like RX bars for as an example, or anything like that. These kind of like bars that we're told are so much healthier than candy bars, and they're protein rich and all this stuff. And then you look at the ingredients, you're just like, this is crap. Like this is really just an expensive candy bar. That's really mostly what it is.
Yeah, I think RX actually is better than most because it's such a short list of ingredients. I think the Cliff bars are the ones that fell off the cliff at some point.
Oh no, you're right. There's definitely worse. I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
mentioned I use RX bars as an example, but the
Well,
example
the
I
thing with
use
the
with them.
RX is it's very sweet because dates is the meat of it, if you will. Like there's egg whites in it, and then there's going to be dates, which are very sweet. So for like if you're legit out for like walking the Trans-Canada Trail or the Northwest Trail or whatever it is, is it the Northwest Pacific Trail, that trail
Oh
that Drew
yeah, yeah.
Barrymore walked in that movie? Like
Oh,
if you're Reese
Reese Witherspoon. Yeah,
Witherspoon, that's it. If you're legit doing that level of physical activity, you might be warranted to eat something like an RX bar that's very high in carbs, very high in sugar, like very rich kind of things. But for most of us sitting at a desk and you're eating your RX bar as a
yeah.
snack,
It's not.
like,
Yeah.
guess what?
Well, and I use them an example of how I actually usually use them as an example of how to read labels, because
Yeah.
a lot of times when we are grocery shopping, we look at what's on the front of the label and we think, oh, it says 3 ingredients. So I'm going to get that. And then in RX bars is a perfect example of, actually, if you turn it around, they have ingredients that they're not listing on the
Yes.
front.
Yes.
That's how I use that as an
Yeah. No,
example.
and
But
and honestly, that's a great example, right? Because I think that you're referring to this whole idea of greenwashing. Oh, well, it's
yes,
non-GMO, it's organic, it's natural, whatever the heck that means
yes.
anymore. And then it still sounds like a science experiment on the label.
On the
Like
label. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And that is my point. Is that though that's the snake oil that's out there. It's this perception that these foods are so healthy, and it's like, and they're really not. And what we were talking about before the podcast even started recording was that really the only way to truly get healthy is to make your own food, to be in
Oh yeah.
control of the ingredients that you're using. And I'm always telling people, when you go grocery shopping, buy things that are ingredients versus things
Yes.
that have ingredients.
Smart.
You know,
I love that.
really, and I use the other term of don't fall asleep at the cart. And that goes back to the RX bars or any of those bars, is that you have to remember on that front of the packaging, that is no different than a billboard. That's pure marketing. It's them trying to pull you into the product. And there's lots of marketing psychology around why things are certain colors, why certain words are focused on. I mean, like, for example, with eggs and chickens, they'll say hormone free. Well, but chickens aren't given hormones, like, ever.
I know, but they're hormone free.
But they're hormone. That's like someone gave a great example of saying, but that's like saying an M&M is, or no, what was it? Oh, it was such a good example. I wish it was like saying orange juice
No gluten.
has yeah, no gluten or something. It's like,
Yeah.
what? It's really like there's so many products like that where
Yeah.
they're clearly just riding trends, and they're just trying to get, it's a money grab, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I am always cautioning people that, well, I should go back. So that's ultimately what drives me, is I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that kind of company. I'm not that type of person. I'm not that type of chef. I'm Even when I used to cook privately for clients, I'd always tell them, they would come to me originally. I remember my first client was this news reporter in LA, and her sister was running her household, I guess. So she was the one I was talking with, and she called me and said, "Oh, we're looking for someone that's going to count calories and do low fat this and that." And I was like, and I had just gotten out of culinary school. I had nothing. I had no money. I had no job. Well, actually, I had a job perspective that was going to pay me $9 an hour at some detox center. I mean,
Oh,
I was
God.
in my
Yeah.
30s and I was about to get paid $9. I was so hard, like, just sad.
Yeah.
I was crying, and I got this call, and I still was like, you know what? I'm not your chef. And she's like, well, why? I said, well, because I don't believe that what you're at. I believe what you want is for her to be healthy, but what you're telling me is not healthy in my judgment. And she said, well, how would you do it? And I said, well, I would not calorie count. I would focus on the ingredients, and I would focus on real fat and not being afraid of fat, but actually choosing good fats. And I would make, I would make everything from scratch. So I'm never giving her anything with any like additives or flavorings or shelf stabilizers or anything like that. And I would choose really clean animals that have been, humanely treated and fed properly. And so I just talked to her like that. And after I finished my spiel, she said, "Okay, we'll do what you just said."
Nice. Nice. Good
And
for
she was
her.
my client for 2 years, and it was incredible. And help me get out of, help me enter this world of being a private chef and do it on my terms. And it was just, yeah, it was beautiful. But that's how I came to the table, is I just didn't buy I always would talk to people about, there's this illusion of health. There's this idea that you think what you're doing is healthy, but is it really? And we can continue to dive into that more and more as individuals, because I mean, even now, a lot of times I'll talk to people, I say, okay, well, what emotional state are you in when you're eating?
Yeah.
So we could talk about the ingredients, we could talk about the sourcing, we could talk about that stuff till we're blue in the face, but there's still deeper places you can go. And
Mm-hmm.
the energy you're in when you're cooking the food, the energy you're in when you're eating the food, the intention. Do you sit? I mean, I was not raised religious at all, but I'll tell you now, before I eat, I always do a prayer.
Yeah.
And it's purely just to get myself in a relaxed state. It's to honor the food that I'm eating, the process of how it got there, honor myself for choosing these foods. But like, just that act of slowing down cannot be discredited. So
Yeah.
there's always levels of health that you can dive into. I just find that most people are staying on the periphery zones, and
Mm-hmm.
they're succumbing to trends, and trends to me are not healthy.
Yeah. No,
Like,
I so
at
agree.
all.
And I love that the pause before a meal. And you don't have to be religious. It doesn't have to be a prayer. It can be taking a breath. It could be just coming, like, coming into the moment, coming into presence, leaving all the stuff behind right now and just focusing your intention, to your point, calming your nervous system down, right?
Yeah,
Because we know that
absolutely.
if we're in a sympathetic state, our digestion is shut down and we can't absorb the food. We can't process it properly, which is just really important. But you just brought something up that I think is a big question that people always ask. And I love talking to chefs about this. Not that I get to talk to chefs often, but because chefs, you know, at the end of the day, you go to a restaurant, a chef has a lot of different agendas. Of course, he needs to make food that people are going to want to pay for. That's job one, because otherwise the restaurant doesn't exist. But then he's got a bottom line to feed. And I think that that's when things really start to go sideways. And fats and cooking oils is where my impression, I mean, there's obviously all the chemicals in in sauces or whatnot that are there. But I think that fats and cooking oils is one of those places where things go so sideways in any aspect of the food industry, whether it's food that's packaged or in a restaurant. Because what are they looking for? They're looking for a fat to cook in that's cheap. And that's not going to flame or burn. Right. I mean, it might burn, but it's not going to burn in a light the restaurant on fire kind of way. And so maybe do you want to talk a little bit about what your perspective is on what are the best fats to cook with, and this whole idea of extra virgin olive oil? Should we heat it? Should we not heat it? It has a, you know, smoke points. I'm sure you've got a perspective on that, because that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I have to tell a little story. So I was hired once, and this answers the question very much so, but I was hired once by this group that were wanting to open a restaurant, and I was hired to do the menu. And the process for us to go down this path started with, well, what's the benchmark? So they drove me around all over LA and Southern California to all the restaurants that had certain items that they wanted to have on their menu, and they believed these were the best. Yeah. And so we either had to get it to be as good as this or better. Mm-hmm. And I love that process. But I remember they took me to this one place. It was like a Thai restaurant that had these roasted potatoes that they just thought were fantastic. And I remember the door opened up and I immediately was hit with the smell of the fried oil. And I was like, I knew right away, I'm like, oh, this is rancid. This is bad. The oil's burned. You can smell it in the air, and you can smell it's bitter, which means it's rancid. And I was like, I just knew right away that any food coming from this kitchen was not going to be good. And I didn't tell them that though. And then we sat down and they got the food, and I went to taste it, and I was 100% correct. The food tasted bad because of the oil. And I told them, I said, this is your benchmark. I said, no problem. I can top this easily. I was like, great. This is your benchmark. This is
the easiest job ever.
Yeah, it would be perfect. And they're like, well, what do you mean this isn't good? And I was like, well, and I explained to them the smell, the taste, and how you could I knew right away. And they said, we don't taste it. I just taste good. I said, okay, well, let me cook for you for 2 weeks, which I then helped to recalibrate their palate. Yes. So, and once they're eating food that's more natural, that's healthier for them, it changes the flavors that you actually can taste. And anyone can do this. And we can actually, right after I tell this, we can go into how they can do this. But but basically, after 2 weeks of eating the way I cooked for them, they went back to the restaurant and they told me, yeah, we can't eat there ever again.
Yeah.
Taste how bad it was. And that's the truth. To your point, that's the truth with all restaurants. Every restaurant's got a bottom line. Unless they're really, really high-end restaurant, you know, where they're making everything from scratch, but you're paying for that. I mean, we're talking that's going to be a $200 meal probably. Mm-hmm. But everything else is minding their P's and Q's somewhere. They're just being mindful of their cost of ingredients, and you'd be surprised. So when I used to have a meal delivery service in LA, and I would go to this place called Restaurant Depot, and they have them all over the world. And I know they have them in Canada too. They might just be called something different, but it's basically a place where restaurants go to buy their food and their materials. And I was going there to buy to-go boxes. That's mostly what I got there. I would see these carts that would already be filled with product, because they would fulfill orders for their clients and then have them with the client's name on them. So I would see these carts just packed full of stuff, And I would see all the restaurants around LA, and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea they were using craft sauces or whatever. Because
Oh,
this Restaurant Depot has very generic stuff. I mean, it's very like, best, I don't know, like craft, all these best foods, like all these companies that you recognize
in
as very
bulk.
conventional and bulk. And
Yeah.
they were buying like, their dressings already pre-made. They were buying sauces already pre-done. And these were restaurants that I thought were making it from scratch.
Yeah.
They weren't that cheap, these places. I was like, what? And
Yeah.
so it really just told me like, wow, so they're cutting their bottom line. They're trying to make a profit, and that's why they're doing this. Because there's the cost of the ingredients. That's one thing. Another thing a lot of people don't know about when you look at the hierarchy of a restaurant is you have, the owner, you have someone that manages the restaurant, then you have potentially a chef. Not all restaurants have a chef. They have someone who helps design the menu, and that might be the chef, but they're not the person cooking every day. That's a
Mm-hmm.
cook. So
Mm-hmm.
there's different labels for these people. Well, those labels come with a different dollar point. So a chef is going to be a higher cost, hourly cost than a cook. And a lot of times what that means is that if a cook is following a recipe a lot of times, so they don't understand necessarily how to pull the food out of danger zone. So like, I say danger zone, I just mean a flavor zone. So like, let's say you're making a dressing, if you are making it from scratch, and it goes bitter, it's just too bitter. A cook might not know how to get out of that
Mm-hmm.
naturally. A chef hopefully will know. So what a cook does is they just add sugar.
Yeah.
So that's why you get things that are either really salty or really sweet, right? Because those are cheap ingredients. Salt and sugar are some of the cheapest ingredients. Like a cook, sorry, a chef might know how to add a little salt, add a little lemon juice. Like they might be able to
They
finesse it
rebalance
out,
it.
but
Yeah.
exactly. But they wouldn't do that necessarily with sugar.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't necessarily default it right away to like just either more salt or more sugar, which is someone that's less trained, that's where they're going to go, or someone that doesn't even really understand the recipe. So I understand why these restaurants have to do it this way, but I think ultimately what we need to know as consumers is we just need to know you can't get healthy eating out. Just
Mm-hmm.
that's it.
Yeah.
It's impossible to be healthy and eat out. It will not, you will not succeed.
Yeah.
And
No,
just
I
know
agree
that.
with you. So going back to that first question, and I that your story of walking into the kitchen and smelling that rancid fat. I remember I was in Vegas for a health conference of all things last month, and walked into a food court, and friends of mine were waiting for some food, and the smell of the rancid deep fried oil that hit me when I walked into this food court, I was like, and it was that smell that gets into your hair, that
Yeah.
that if you're there for more than 10 minutes, you're walking around smelling like that for the rest of the day.
Oh, let
It's
alone if you eat it,
yeah,
then
and
it's
like
coming
there's
out of your skin.
and your body uses what you give it, right? So it doesn't want to, but it's going to integrate those damaged fats into cell membranes, which then aren't going to be able to function properly, and it just leads to a host of problems. But let's talk a little. I just want to go back to that question of, in your opinion, what are the best fats people should be cooking with, and
Yeah.
talking a little bit about extra virgin olive oil. Should we be heating it at all? Because definitely, like in Italy, they will use olive oil to cook. Maybe not at high heat, but so.
Yeah. And once again, it goes back to this illusion of health of like, or what, well, one group says this, another group says that. So
Mhm.
there's not tons of like data that says this is how it's supposed to be done. No one's really done tons of research. So to your point though, like a lot of these vegetable oils, even olive oil, have a low smoke point. So meaning that if you go too high, then it will start to smoke. But so some people will say, yeah, but olive oil has a lot of antioxidants in it. And so those antioxidants help to offset the smoke point. So some people will be like, well, olive oil is okay on high heat. And you can even do searches. I did one recently to answer someone's question more kind of specifically. And I saw so many articles that were saying, no, olive oil is okay on high heat. But I then go back to, well, what does it taste like to you?
I
Like,
was going to say,
try it.
the taste changes. Even
It
coconut
changes.
oil on high heat gets nasty, right?
Totally. You just got to taste it and you'll see. Like I mean, even if I take olive oil and I'm making a dressing and the blender, if I have the blender on high for too long, it heats it up and it changes the flavor. And I don't like it. So I personally do not like high heat with olive oil. I don't use any of these vegetable oils to cook with. I use, I use animal fats. So
Yeah.
I save my bacon grease and I use that sometimes. I use leaf lard sometimes when I'm baking. I'll use tallow. I'll use duck fat, for example. If you ever make potatoes, duck fat is fantastic
Yep.
with potatoes. It's so good. Um, I do use coconut oil sometimes. Just depends on what I'm using it with. And then I use ghee a lot. So ghee is clarified butter. For those that don't know, that means that the dairy has been removed, as much of it as possible has been removed, and you just have the dairy fat. Like, so the fat is all that ghee is, the butter
Yep.
fat. And I love cooking with ghee, and ghee is, 5,000 years plus they've been using it around the world. So it's kind of a tried and true real food that you just know, like, yeah, this takes high heat and it takes it fine.
Yeah.
Um, and then sometimes I even do a hybrid. So what I'll do is I might start with ghee, but then at the very end of the dish, I might add some butter, because you don't want to burn the butter, but you do want the flavor of the butter. So
Yeah.
I'll sometimes do that. And same thing, you can also stabilize the coconut oil by adding ghee to it. So let's just say you're cooking coconut oil and you're saying that it changes the flavor. Well, just add ghee at the top of it. So maybe do half coconut oil, half ghee, and just by mixing those two together, it will help to increase the smoke point for
Yeah.
coconut oil.
I've done
And
that
so you
actually.
still,
I've
yeah, and
actually
it
even
helps.
done it with, I've done ghee even with olive oil, although I'm
Yes.
not at high heat again. One of the things we were taught in nutrition school is one of the things that can help to be protective with olive oil when you're heating it. And again, I'm
Yep.
not high, never high heat, let's say low, medium heat, is
Sure.
aromatic herbs can be helpful. And alliums like garlic and onions
Yep.
have properties that help to protect the antioxidants in like protect the olive oil from going kind of getting oxidated, I guess is the proper
Well,
term.
and you also, whenever you add any, so like that's one thing too, is if you're cooking with any kind of fat or oil or anything like that, the minute you add something to the pan, it's going to cool the pan down.
Yeah.
So that's another way of just kind of keeping the temperature lower, or moderating the temperature, is just make sure you keep adding something. And then, you always want to be playing with your temperature as you cook. Like anyone that just turns it on and then leaves it always at the same one, you're not really finessing the food, because food gets cooler or hotter depending on how long it's been, like how much you've added, it cools down, and then how long it's been on the burner, it's going to get hotter. So I mean, all chefs, anyone that's familiar in the kitchen like that, is always lowering or increasing the heat. Stirring, whenever you stir it, it cools it down as well. So there's lots of things you can do to help offset that smoke point. But I do not cook. I don't have any of these things in my house. Like I don't have soy oil. I
Oh
don't
God,
have
no.
rice
Yeah.
bran oil. I don't have sunflower, safflower, canola. I
Corn.
don't have
Yeah.
any of that, corn, none of that. I don't do any of that stuff. And if there's one big trend that's happening right now, is I think the awareness that how bad those oils are for people. Um, so you're seeing that more and more now. The problem, once again, goes back to, okay, well, if you're not cooking for yourself, how do you avoid those oils? Because if you're buying anything at a grocery store that's pre-made, I guarantee it's using those oils, because that's how they keep the price point down.
Yeah.
I mean, my daughter, we just my 10-year-old, we've been teaching her about like the oils and how bad they are. And so she'll say, well, can I get these chips and or crackers? Or she's really into that kind of stuff. And we're like, well, if you can find it with this oil, then absolutely. And so now when we're at the grocery store, she's like, can I have these crackers? I'm like, well, read the back.
Yeah.
And then she'll read it and she'll say, oh, it has sunflower oil. I'm like, nope, we can't do that. And
Yeah.
then she'll read another one. Oh, that one has safflower, or that one has canola. And so she's reading. It's great because she's learning to actually look for these ingredients. But then when she finds one with like, I don't know, avocado oil or coconut oil, she's like, wait, I can do this one, right? And I'm like, yeah, you can do that one.
Yeah.
So
No, it's
it's kind
great.
of,
Get them young.
yeah,
I was actually and I think we're going to wrap up soon, but I was actually speaking to a potential client recently, and they said to me, yeah, it's great, like I can change the way I cook for me, but then there's my whole family, like what do I do about
yeah,
them? And I'm like, you do your cooking, they're going to follow you. And she said, well, they're used to all these things. And I'm like, and they'll get used to other stuff. You have an opportunity right now to your point, to re-educate, recalibrate the palates of your family and teach those kids what it is to eat real food. Like I grew up in a household where my mom cooked everything from scratch. And I now have a 22-year-old who cooks for himself. Like he doesn't always cook for himself, but he knows how to cook for himself and he understands the value of making his own food. And if we can get out of that mindset of, oh, the kids need to have hot dogs and mac and cheese and whatnot, and move into a space of learning to make, and to your point, and I think you've got resources that help people to make food without being in the kitchen for 2 hours and make it
yeah,
delicious and make it healthy. Like it just doesn't take any more time to make a healthy food than it does an unhealthy food. A lot of the,
yeah.
it'll be a simpler dish, if you will, but it can be light years better for your family. And it's an opportunity for everybody to step through the door together.
Well, we can speak to that for a little bit. I mean, because one thing is I think we assume that just because we eat every day that we're supposed to love cooking. And the reality is most people don't. A lot of people really do not like cooking. Now, just because you don't like it, you shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like
Mm-hmm.
don't think just because you don't like it that you can't still find a way to do it, because we really, that's ultimately what we're advocating here, is we're saying you want to be healthy, you got to make your own food. So so then the next question that I would ask them is that, well, how can we find joy in this thing that you don't really like? And so I always try to kind of get people into a different mindset. So I say, well, don't read a recipe because maybe that's very overwhelming for you. So think of it more like a formula.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, well, what's in the formula of my plate? Well, I need to have protein, I need to have fat, and maybe vegetables, right? But those are really the three main ingredients. That's really it. I mean, yeah, if you want to have resistant starches, that's all relative to whatever your diet is. But those are the three main things that you're going to need. And I say, so start there. So just choose what your protein is. And the easiest way to do any of this stuff is to just saute it, just to create a
Yep.
stir fry kind of. That's always the easiest, or roast it on a pan, a one sheet dinner versus or a saute. Those are always the easiest ways. Um, but so you choose a fat. We just talked about ghee. That's a fat. Okay, so you'll use some ghee. You start with a tablespoon, and you're then adding that. You add the protein. Oh wait, it looks like I don't have any more fat in my pan, so now add a little bit more. You know what I mean? Like just keep looking at the meal and assessing. Well, the amount of food that I'm using in this formula, does this need more
Mm-hmm.
of whatever I'm giving? And you just do it that way. And
Yeah.
and I find when you simplify these things, maybe you play music that you really like,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you in the background have your favorite podcast, whatever it is, like you create the environment that's going to bring you joy for this activity that is not joyful to you,
Yeah.
if that
Well,
makes
and
sense.
you can also, if there's other people in your household, enlist them, especially if there's kids in the
Totally.
household, get them involved because this is how they learned from us. And of course, then
Yes.
you've got your beautiful Pluck seasonings that you can just sprinkle on top and add some complexity to your dish without having done anything fancy, right?
Yeah.
As you said, like you roast, broil, saute your protein. Sometimes you can throw the vegetables right in there with the protein. Um,
Absolutely.
and just keep it simple. So one thing I want to make sure we talk about before we're done with this episode is how much organs are people getting from the Plex seasoning?
Yeah,
Like,
so the flavored ones have 15% of the organ meat blend, and I'm always telling people that you can't, it's not apples to apples. So like if I have a raw organ
mm-hmm.
and I freeze dry that, or so when it's raw, it's 100%, and I freeze dry it, not freeze it, sorry, freeze dry it, I'm left with about 23%, 20 to 23%.
So it's shrunk. Yeah.
It's shrunk. I mean, that water, you lose that water weight. So I'm taking 100% organ and I'm now left with about 20%. So that's very concentrated. So when I say 15%, don't think like, oh, that's nothing. It's something. You're getting micronutrients plus frequent use equals cumulative effect. And the more often you use it, which I recommend people just treat it like salt and pepper, like just
Mm-hmm.
use it on everything. The more you use it, the more benefits you get. And then we do have 100% product. If you're like, oh, I know that I want, maximum nutrition, great. Then use Pluck Pure. That's 100%. And now you're getting really concentrated amounts. But you still don't need to use a lot. I still recommend people only use about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon for an entire meal, not just for themselves. I'm saying for like a family. Like
Wow.
you don't need tons. Because keep in mind, based on what we talked about earlier, there's still only one liver in that animal for the whole tribe. Like you don't need, 4 ounces of organ meat every day.
Mm-hmm.
We can get micronutrients, we can get micro amounts daily, and that will add up over time. And I always use the example of like, well, if you're wondering, does micro dosing, that's basically what we're talking about, is micro dosing work?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's look at where it's worked to the negative. Glyphosate, when
Yeah.
glyphosate came out in the late 50s, it was FDA said, oh no, this is micro amounts, it won't affect human health. And now look at us. It's in our breast milk, it's in our food, it's in our
Tissues.
water, it's in our air, it's tissue, it's everywhere. We cannot get rid of it. And many people will support that it's probably killing us, like that
Yeah.
it's causing way more harm now than anyone ever thought was possible. And that was even smaller amounts than we're putting in Pluck. I mean, we're talking micro amounts.
Yeah.
And now it's everywhere. So micro dosing works.
Mm-hmm.
And considering that we are now currently, when you look at the seasonings, for example, on the market, what is it you're actually putting on your food right now? Well, most people are putting on Lowry's all purpose or something like that. And some of these things have sugar, some of them have like wheat in them, some of them have like
MSG.
shelf stabilizer, MSG, shelf stabilizers. So, and most of them, they'll have lots of salt and no nutrients, like,
Mm-hmm.
and because it's not even good salt, right? So you got to just look at it that's how I kind of simplify. I'm like, look, you're already seasoning your food and you're not getting nutrients from it. So now you're seasoning your food, you're getting these whole food nutrients. We use Redmond Real Salt, which is a great salt company. And we're just putting that quality, whole, nutrient dense food. We're making it super easy for you to get those micro dosings for every meal. And what I love, you're a parent, I'm a parent, and that's really one of my motivators when I created this was, how do I get these nutrient dense foods into my kids without a fight?
Yeah.
Once again, it's got to be easy. And I go back to that principle of like, I've got to make health sustainable, but it's got to be realistic. If I have to fight my kid every time to get them to eat pate or get them to eat some organ, then that's not easy. That's making my life harder. And
Mm-hmm.
and our lives are already hard enough.
Oh,
What I
for
mean?
sure.
Just being a parent is hard, right? So it's like I'm all about how can I make this easy for myself as a parent, but yet still get these nutrients into my kid. And for my money, Pluck has been working beautifully. My kids ask for it on everything.
Love it.
I don't have to put it on myself. They ask for it. They put it on their eggs, they put it on toast, they put it on popcorn, they put it on tacos, they put it on steak. We've tried it on oysters. It goes with everything.
I love it. I love it. So what are the so we're going to wrap up. What are the different flavors, and do you have anything else new coming down the pipes people should know? And do you want to talk about no, we're not going to talk about Organinuary, only because this isn't coming
This
out
is
in
going to come
Organ.
out. I know this is going
I
to
know.
come out after again. No, I was aware of that. But just know that if you're hearing this and you've heard us talk about Organinuary, you can make Organinuary any month of the year. You can commit to eating organ meats at any
Organune.
point. Yeah, Organune.
Orgaprale.
So I'm trying to think of other ones. Organ Ember. No, I don't know. But yeah, there's so many. I just recommend, like, check us out at eatpluck.com. We have tons of recipes. We're constantly putting out just value and tips on how you can ease into organ meats. Pluck is definitely the gateway. It's just it's so easy to get in it, but I'm not saying that Pluck is the only thing you should do. What we're really advocating is eating nose to tail. So I want you to then explore eating the whole organs. I just want you to get into it, and I know that Pluck will help, because one of the things we were talking about earlier is the palate, and how I was saying how I changed those people's palate in a couple of weeks. Well, you can do that with yourself when you cut out, anything that's sweet, when you cut out alcohol, when you cut out a lot of these starches that convert into your body quickly and convert into sugar quickly in your body. You're basically recalibrating your body to be more sensitive to things that are really sweet. And so we used to do this thing called the sugar control detox, and we basically remove starches, we remove desserts, alcohol, and most fruit. And after 2 weeks, people would try to drink a glass of wine and couldn't do it. These are people that were drinking 3 glasses before the 2 weeks. So you really start to taste the real food out there, what real food tastes like. And that's what actually using Pluck does, is because it's umami and it's very savory, meaty, it actually kind of helps to change your palate. I'll kind of end with this story. This is so cool. I was so excited to hear this, but a practitioner that I know had a client whose child was spectrum, and their child was a very picky eater, would only eat like maybe 3 foods. And so the practitioner said, here, I don't want you to change anything, but just start adding Pluck to their food. And just doing that one thing helped to change their child's palate to then welcome in other flavors.
Wow.
And now the child's eating more adventurously, and they can actually start to incorporate different, healthier foods, just because the kid is now more willing to try these new foods. So you cannot underestimate the power of getting these flavors, getting this nutrition into your body, and how important, and how even these small little things can create huge, huge lasting effects.
Love it. I love it. Okay. So, sir, eatpluck.com. What are the flavors that are available right now? There's a couple of really good ones.
All-purpose. Yeah, we have all-purpose, which is it's got smoked paprika in it. It's kind of just a general really good spice. We have a spicy version of that, which a lot of people tell me is their favorite. And then we have a zesty garlic, which is has no seeds, no nightshades. So that's an AIP product.
Yeah.
And that one is kind of very ranchy tasting. It's got some carrot in it and lots of herbs. It's just reminds me of kind of like a ranch kind of dressing a little bit. And then we have Pluck Pure, which is no spices, no herbs, no salt. So we have those 4 products available at this point. Where I hope to go down the road is to, as I mentioned earlier, is I want to even go beyond seasonings and create other products that incorporate more nose to tail. So I'm still utilizing the freeze-dried modern technique of getting these organs, but I would love to eventually have brain available, like have basically like a men's health line, a women's health line, and I'm utilizing the different organs that specifically feed those, has, like, for women, it would have ovaries, it would have heart, it would have all these different things that would help brain, and then for men too, and then even have like a cognitive line. So really continue down that road of functionality with food.
Love it.
But all whole food based, all whole foods.
I love it. Well, and you could even do like a Pluck curry and a Pluck Thai.
Oh, totally.
I mean, there's the possibilities are endless.
The curry,
or we could just take
the
Pluck
next
Pure and add it to our curry powder. I mean, obviously, but
absolutely. And we recommend people do that as well, as like just create your own Pluck, with that Pluck Pure.
Make your Pluck. Okay, so guys, if you go to pluck.com, you get access to all these resources and more of James' amazing stuff. And also, if you use discount code BSP10, you get to save 10% off your purchase. And we're starting to see Pluck. Like I'm the podcaster in Canada too. So often we're talking about products that are not available in Canada, but I've started to see a couple of Pluck things in a couple of very niche stores. So hopefully we get to see Pluck, a lot more Pluck,
and
more widespread.
if you don't see it, tell them to carry it, because I think
Yeah.
the more we get the word out there, the easier it will be for us to get it sold. Because we have so many people asking us in Canada for it, and but we need your help, because I don't know if this store, the health boosters, I don't know if they realize how much you want it.
Yeah, well, and anyway, that's a whole other topic with the whole vegan movement and around the health
Yes.
food industry and stuff. So we're not going to go there today. We'll save it for another day, but
Yes,
because that's a whole other kettle
it
of fish.
is. It is.
Um, but thank you so much, James, for your time today and for doing what you do, because I think that, one dish at a time, you're making the world a better place. So
Thank you so much for having me.
it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.